everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Shifty's 49ers Talk. Today we will be doing episode 3 of my most intriguing training camp battles. We will be focusing on the running back position. Couple of other things to note before we get into that. Tomorrow, Sunday, 7 p.m. Pacific time, I'll be doing a live stream with Jay in the Bay. What's good? I'm going to put a link to his channel in the description. Definitely stay tuned for that, guys. That's going to be a really good show. We're going to talk 49er football for about an hour or so. Also, on Monday, then, I will be releasing the final video, part 4 of my top 20 most valuable 49ers heading into the 2022 season. I will be revealing my top 5 guys. I think you guys will know who they are, but what the order will be, that will remain to be seen. Now let's get back to today's video. Without further ado, let's talk running backs. Alrighty, guys, so I think we know that Elijah Mitchell is running back number 1 for the 49ers. Last year, he absolutely burst onto the scene. Week 1, great game at Detroit. If we look at his stats last year, 963 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns, and 4.7 yards per carry. So that's really, really solid. A big thing that did stick out to me was no fumbles. So that's someone that you can count on. He had over 200 carries in the regular season. No fumbles. You gotta love that. The one thing that he will really need to improve in his game is going to be receiving. So really what I'd like to see in training camp and in preseason is how he, develops his game in terms of pass catching and pass blocking. That's going to be huge for him. Ultimately, though, I looked at some of the stats from last year, and in the 11 regular season games that he played, 64% of the rushes went to Elijah Mitchell. So essentially 2 out of every 3 times we ran the ball in the 11 games he played in, it went to him. Now, to me, what I think Shanahan wants to do is basically spread it out, right? So if we looked at last season, we played 20 games when you include the regular season and the 3 playoff games, and we almost played a 21st game. So the big thing that we really have to do is be able to spread the ball out a lot more in terms of the running back position. We rotated through a lot of running backs, a lot of guys got hurt. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to scale that back a little bit for Elijah Mitchell. Now, the big thing is who are going to be the guys to step up to really be able to effectively take those carries and really make the most of those opportunities. We're going to discuss that coming right up. The first guy that I want to talk about is going to be undrafted free agent. That's running back Jordan Mason from Georgia Tech. So if we look at him, he's got really, really solid size. 5'11", 223. He is a very, very physical runner. I haven't watched a ton of Georgia Tech, but from what I have watched, very physical runner. He breaks a ton of tackles, so you gotta love that. 4.58 40, so definitely not slow by any means, but doesn't really have that breakaway speed. So I think when you look at a guy like him, people like to make the comparison of, well, when Matt Breida, when we got him as an undrafted free agent back in 2017, could Jordan Mason, be the same kind of guy? Now look, it sounds like in minicamp and everything there that he really impressed. But I think for, Jordan Mason, he's really going to have to show some things that other guys can't do. I think Tyrion Davis Price can break tackles. Jeff Wilson Jr. can break tackles. Elijah Mitchell can break tackles. So he's got to develop something else as well. Really, I think if he can develop a receiving game, he has a possibility to make the 53-man roster. I think it's highly unlikely that he does. I would say that we probably try and stash him on the practice squad, and maybe, if a couple of guys get hurt, then we promote him up to the active roster. But Jordan Mason has a shot, but I think it's unlikely this year. Next up, who I want to talk about is going to be last year's 3rd round pick, and that is running back Trey Sermon. Now, Trey Sermon has, similar to Jordan Mason, who we just spoke about, has really good size, 6 foot, 215 pounds. You gotta like that. So he really didn't get to showcase much last year. I think what Shanahan really noticed was that Elijah Mitchell was playing so well that Sermon just couldn't get on the field. Not only that, but Sermon got, banged up a little bit too. Overall, in his rookie year, just 167 rushing yards, had a touchdown, 4.1 average, so not terrible, and also didn't have any fumbles. So when you think about it, he really only featured last year in 3 games. It was against Green Bay week 3, the next week against Seattle, and then Jacksonville later on. The other games, we didn't see him really out there at all. Now, here's the thing, kind of like, and it's going to be similar to Jordan Mason, is that he needs to develop a receiving game because, Elijah Mitchell, that's not a huge part of his game. So in order to be a guy who can solidify his spot in the roster, he's going to need to be able to pass block and be a receiver. Can that happen? Well, that remains to be seen. Now, it sounds like, and it seems like from like watching online, he's been working out real hard in the offseason, so you'll love to see that. I really do hope that he can just make a huge leap in year 2 and be that overall, just all-around running back who can be out there and do everything. 4.5740 though, so that's going to, limit him somewhat. We know that typically Shanahan loves those speedster running backs. We saw it with Breda, we saw it with Raheem Mostert, Tevin Coleman ran a fast 40 too, so we'll see. I think Trey Sermon definitely has a shot, but he's going to have to progress big time if he wants to make the 53-man roster. And I think, honestly, at this point, he's really on the outside looking in, believe it or not. Next up, we have a guy, JaMycal Hasty, also an undrafted guy a few years ago out of Baylor. So he's a guy who has sneaky big size. He's only 5'8", so not the tallest guy, but 205 pounds. Now, JaMycal Hasty is the guy who I actually think at the time being, as of this recording, I think he's basically could be considered a lock for a roster spot. And you're thinking, JaMycal Hasty, a lock? What are you talking about? Well, the reason why I say that is he's one of the only running backs that we saw last year who can actually, effectively catch the ball. We saw him out there on big time third down situations, pass blocking and running routes. So, he has an advantage over every other running back on this roster. Last year, and to get some stats behind it, he had 23 receptions. So it took me a second, but he had 23 receptions. All the other running backs combined last year in the regular season, 29 receptions. And you think about, he didn't play a ton of snaps. So JaMycal Hasty at me, I think he, given some opportunities to run the ball, I think he could be pretty solid. He does fumble the ball, so that's not great for his chances. But at the time of recording, he's the only guy running back position who can actually catch the ball, consistently. So I think he, if he can keep doing his thing, if he can show that he can, take care of the football, limit those fumbles, and keep developing as a runner, I think he has a great shot to make the roster, the 53-man roster, that is. Alrighty, now we are going to be talking about another rookie, and that is going to be Tyrion Davis Price, a guy who I certainly didn't have on my radar come the draft. There was a couple of other guys that I liked, but hey, Tyrion Davis Price, from what I've watched, seems pretty darn impressive. So we took him in the 3rd round out of LSU. Really great size. Our biggest running back, actually. He's 6'1", 232. So big, bruising back, very, very physical. We saw what he did in the game against Texas A&M against our other rookie, Leon O'Neal Jr., basically just plowed right through him. So I think, to me, Tyrion Davis Price is the guy who, all the rushes that went to Deebo Samuel last year, I think they essentially want to try and give those to a guy like Tyrion Davis Price. So 4.4840, so really solid speed, faster than a lot of the other guys on the roster. But I think the way that he runs and his physical ability, they want to obviously limit what Deebo does. Deebo wants to limit what he does in the running game. That doesn't seem to be that seems to be common knowledge at this point. So I think Shanahan will try and get the ball into Tyrion Davis Price's hands in those situations, especially in the red zone, where if you can break one tackle or so, bam, you could be in for a touchdown. Also, short yardage situations, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, things like that. Expect to see him out there for rushes. Could also be out there, play action to TDP, and maybe we dump it off to Kittle or Juszczyk or one of our wide receivers. I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record here, though, but if he can develop a receiving game. He didn't really catch a ton of balls at LSU, but if he can develop, to be an effective route runner, even just coming out, of the backfield, if he can develop into a pass blocker, really get the offense down, I think he has a great chance to see a lot of playing time, even in 2022. Now, from reports from the media, it sounds actually like Jordan Mason was a little bit more impressive, in mini camps and whatnot, but it's a whole different story once the pads come on, and I'd love to see this guys, the guys battling it out in training camp, in the preseason games. It's going to be a whole lot of fun because in preseason, that's when guys are fighting for jobs, fighting for those final roster spots. So it's going to be really exciting to see a position battle such as running back, where it's obviously incredibly physical. I like Tyrion Davis price. I think he's essentially a lock considering a third round pick this year. But I'm really excited to see what happens during preseason and during training camp for TDP. Alrighty, now we are going to move on to our final guy to talk about today, and that's going to be Jeff Wilson Jr. Now, I recently saw a report from Matt Barrows, one of the 49ers beat reporters, that he said if the season started today, Jeff Wilson Jr. would be the number 2 running back, and I don't disagree with him. He has the experience in the system. He knows it very, very well. He knows what we expect out of our running backs. But let's talk a little bit about numbers. Now, 6 foot 194. It's crazy because to me, I actually thought Jeff Wilson was a lot bigger than that. He plays bigger than that for sure. But last year kind of had a bit of a down year. 294 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, only a 3.7 yards per carry average. So not the best. He did have a career year the year before in 2020. So he had 600 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns, and a 4.8 yards per carry. So we've seen maybe he's one of those guys who it takes him a couple of games and, it takes him a number of snaps throughout the game to start wearing down the defense and to get into the rhythm of a game. Now, ultimately, if I had to say right now, if we were looking at the 4 running backs who make the roster, the 53-man that is, I'm really looking at Elijah Mitchell, Jeff Wilson Jr., TDP, and JaMycal Hasty. That's right. I probably would have Trey Sermon getting cut. Obviously, I think we'd like to get him on the practice squad, but there are plenty of teams out there, especially teams who are still very much in a rebuilding mode, who'd be happy to put a waiver claim in for a third-round pick from last year at the running back position. So we'll have to see what happens. It's going to be a really interesting battle at the running back position. I think there's going to be a ton of great videos out there from beat reporters, at training camp, just seeing how much these guys are going to be pushing each other to make the roster. But not only that, watch out for these preseason games because it's going to be wild. Just like a lot of our other positions, the 49ers running back depth we're very deep. So the competition, the battles in training camp, the battles in preseason are going to be awesome. I just can't wait. I'm super stoked. Training camp's around the corner, preseason's around the corner, and that means the regular season's around the corner, and it's just coming right up to, every football fan's favorite time of the year. So overall, guys, I want to leave it right there. I gave a little bit of a prediction. I gave a little bit of a rundown of each of the guys who'll be competing for the positions. I'd love to hear what you think of my thoughts. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, is there any possible trades that could be made? We'll see what happens. Could the 49ers, and I'm just going to throw it out there, just not a prediction, but just keep this on the, something out there, but could Trey Sermon get traded? It's a possibility. Just, throwing it out there. That's some food for thought for you guys in the comments. Let me know what you think. As always, do please like and subscribe. It really, really helps out the channel. And at this point, guys, I'm going to say 2 things, and you know what they are. The butt counts, and I'm going to catch y'all on the flip side.